now my mind is blown. No surprise, guess I should have known. Oh, now my mind is blown. No surprise, guess I should have known. You got control of me, break my barricades. Walls are crumbling, grounds they shake. You came to save, but it's way too late. Every single time you stay, I cave. You got control of me, break my barricades. Walls are crumbling. Every single time you say I cave. You got control of me.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Neurodivergent News, where we are redefining what it means to be neurodivergent. Different does not mean damaged, it just means you have a superpower that no one else has. I am Deanna Brakefield. I am your host and the owner of Lionheart Kingdom Marketing. Wh- Um, I am a mom of 7 beautiful children, 6 of which are neurodivergent. My husband has Asperger's, and if you can't tell, I have ADHD and am very hyper. Yay. So today I have with me an amazing young man that I have had the pleasure of getting to know. He is an author of an absolutely wonderful book called Growing Up with Asperger's. I have with me Mitch Grace. Mitch, welcome.
Hey there, Miss Brakefield. Thank you so much for having me. And your tagline for the news show, it reminds me a lot of Temple Grandin's book, "Different, Not Less."
Really?
Yes, the it's just from the brief snippet I heard of it, so reminds me a lot of it. Thank you for having me, Miss Brakefield.
Oh, you don't have to call me Miss Brakefield, please. Lord, you're gonna make me feel old. Just Deanna is fine.
Well, thank you for having me on, Deanna.
So, tell me a little bit about the man behind the book.
So, as you said earlier, my name is Mitch Grace. I was diagnosed with what's now called high functioning autism, or I'm not even sure if it's called that anymore. The terminology changes so frequently, but I was diagnosed with, at the time, what is known as Asperger's syndrome, right before my freshman year of high school. This was around 2010, yeah, to early 2010, and the my parents had suspected that I was on the spectrum, but they didn't really get full on confirmation until around 2010 when I was in high school. So, but even growing up, I figured something was up because my parents would tell me that I could not take a joke, that I spoke in a very monotone voice, that I would talk like a robot a lot of the times. Just that's how I sounded, and I had a difficult time carrying on a conversation, so I took the experiences I learned all throughout my childhood and into my adulthood and professional career, and I turned it into the book that you mentioned earlier, Growing Up with Asperger's: Lessons Learned and Shareable Wisdom.
So, since it is the topic of the book, I may get a little personal with my questions, and I'll apologize for that. Did you always feel that you stood out a little bit, that you didn't quite fit in, that you were just a little different? Or did that come later?
No, I've that was pretty apparent as I developed more, elementary and middle school, I realized I stuck out. Like the conversations I had with, like, it was just so difficult to have a conversation with another one of my classmates, my friends, and even my parents. And I would observe other people talking, and the conversations flowed a lot more naturally. So I was just wondering, well, shoot, why aren't my conversations going like that? How are they able to, figure out what that person was feeling, even if they weren't saying anything? Like, how is this happening? So I did suspect that I stood out. And then I have ADHD as well. And so now oftentimes I would talk louder than a lot of my classmates, and that got me in trouble a number of times. And now, like, I just naturally have a louder voice, or maybe that's due to something else. But yeah, just inability to understand social cues, and then just my loud and off the walls personality definitely made me stand out.
Was there a way that it benefited you? Like, was there a hobby or an interest or something that maybe you had more time to devote to?
So in middle school, I started taking theater classes, which requires you to have big gestures and to speak loudly so the people in the back can hear you. So I excelled in that. And then as for a hobby, I'm an active participant in my local Toastmasters club. And if you don't know what Toastmasters is, it's a public speaking club. And so I excelled at that due to my already loud and big gestures and rather large personality on top of all of the theater training I had. So, excuse me, I was then able to translate those skills over to public speaking, and that has helped me a lot in pursuing that hobby.
You consider public speaking a hobby.
Yes, I do. I understand that a lot of people are afraid of public speaking, and I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all. I always get a little bit of stage fright right before I go on to speak, but I enjoy it. I enjoy having a crowd. I enjoy having a lot of people's attention. I love getting feedback on how I do speaking. I've given speeches on a variety of topics, ranging from my favorite late night talk show host, Craig Ferguson, to more personal stories where at one point I had the option to choose between two different grad schools, and I talked about my methodology of how I chose the one I ended up going to, and even more farcical and intentionally exaggerated stories, like the time my dad and I went speedboating in a Cancun mangrove, and the boat crashed, and we almost got eaten by an alligator. So
Okay, now wait a minute. You said that was an exaggerated story. So how much of that was exaggeration, or was that just what you just told us what actually happened?
about 95% was exaggerated. My dad and I have gone speedboating in a Cancun mangrove. There are alligators in those waters, but the boat never crashed, and we never had a close encounter with an alligator. But there are parts in Cancun where you can get pretty close to an alligator, whether it be above the water, on the shores, and whatnot. And the locals tell you just kind of keep your distance from them.
So when did the public speaking start?
Oh, the public speaking, I had to take a public speaking course, a college class. It was required my freshman year of college, and I got an A in it. And so, I've always had that inkling of, well, if I can't do theater full time, maybe I can do public speaking. I've always had the desire to be in front of a crowd again. And so, eventually, at one point in my professional career, I've discovered that I could actually take extended lunches on certain days, and so I just Googled, Toastmasters club near me, and a few popped up, and so I narrowed down one to visit, and then I visited them, and that was over 2 years ago, and I've been a active participant ever since.
So it sounds like public speaking really gave you that avenue into being a social person and learning those skills that you always felt deficit in.
It certainly helped enhance what I'd previously learned. Because when Toastmasters, they teach you volume control, they teach you tone, they teach you pacing, gestures, and they teach you like how to say certain things to make more impact on what you're saying. Like if you pause in a specific part of your sentence, then whatever you're saying can have more of an impact and whatnot. So the little nuances like that I've learned at Toastmasters have really helped me in my personal and professional careers.
So, skipping ahead a little bit, you told us you went to college. What specifically did you go for?
So I originally wanted to go into business, specifically advertising, because what always fascinated me about advertising is how different countries advertise to their consumer base. And so, like for example, Japan was one I really wanted to do a study abroad in Japan to figure out how they advertise to their consumer bases because it's a lot more. in your face and animated and whatnot. And I figured, hey, we could take some of that and translate it over to the U.S. consumer base. That that dream ended the instant I took a business math class, and I took my first test and I got an 8 on it. 8, not 80, not 18, 8. 4 plus 4.
Okay.
Yes, and so the professor I do remember the professor said at the beginning of the class, "Hey, this is a business weed out class," and I got weeded out. So, eventually, I changed my, majors a few times, but I ended up sticking with and got my bachelor's and master's in, public administration, which is with the goal of being a city manager because I had a professor at one of my colleges who I really got to, I got to pick their brain, and because they were city managers and before they became professors, and so this person had a wealth of knowledge and so many stories to tell, and so I just fell in love with the career path, and then I had a few internships with the, working for my local governments and whatnot, and I just fell in love with it, and so that was public administration is what I finally settled on wanting to do.
Go ahead. You're fine.
Mhm. Uh, Yeah, I got accepted into 2 different, master's programs,
Mhm.
like I mentioned earlier, and I gave a Toastmasters speech about that, and I ended up sticking with the college that I went to where I got my bachelor's because I already knew the staff, I had friends that were already gonna be there, and that ended up being a great decision because if I'd gone to the other place, even though it was a more, I guess, recognized university, it had a bit more the public management program had a bit more prestige to it. The one I ended up going with, that was a great decision.
Okay. So you finally graduated. What happened next?
Oh, then COVID happened.
Oh no.
Yes, then COVID happened. So I had an internship during the first onset of COVID, visiting each city's department, spending a day with them and getting to learn what they do and whatnot. And I thoroughly enjoyed that, but that came to a close. That came to a close eventually, and then the pickle I found myself in was that a lot of, if not most of, local, federal, county, state governments, they had to implement hiring freezes because of the pandemic, and so I was unemployed for a significant amount of time, like, I wanna say 8 months, if not more. So I had to start networking and exploring career fields that I would never have considered otherwise, and then br- I got to I really had to get outside my comfort zone, start networking because that's I wish that's something I had learned a little bit more on in college is networking and knowing where to go and who to talk to and whatnot. And so by trial and error, I did eventually uh, meet someone who was kind enough to extend me a temporary job, which turned into a full time one. So in a career I never would have considered otherwise, in a career field, excuse me, that I never would have thought of otherwise. So it's it's by pure circumstance that I'm in the position I'm in now.
Do you mind sharing with us where you ended up?
Yes, like I am now the chief of staff of a oil and gas brokerage and a real estate capital company. The two companies have the same CEO, and I work directly for the CEO. So
That is a huge jump from where you intended to land.
it is. Yeah, from city management to oil and gas and real estate capital. I if you could find the connections between those 3 fields, you are a smarter person than I am because I sure can't.
I'm not even gonna try, but it sounds like it's been an interesting ride.
It has been, it has been. I've learned a lot about myself, what I'm capable of, and the both industries that I'm working in, so it's definitely been beneficial for sure.
So at what point did you decide to write a book?
So I had I had always wanted to write a book of some sort, whether it be nonfiction or fiction. I had a lot of fiction ideas, but could never really quite pin them down. And then I met someone at a previous job who's I'm going to name drop here. His name is Jeff Savage, and he has his own book out called Savage Resilience, and it talks about um, his experience running all sorts of marathons and whatnot. And he just ran the Berlin Marathon not too long ago, and his story is incredible. And then he published his book, and then at one point I met him for lunch, or maybe it was dinner. I think it was dinner. Yeah, it was dinner. It was a early dinner though. Um, and then I asked him, it's like, hey, so tell me about the publishing of your book. And so he told me what he did and who he did it with and the process he did it with. And he asked me, he's like, do you have a book you're wanting to publish? And I said, yeah, I had a few ideas. And so we discussed the ones back and forth. And then eventually I just told him about how, I had this very faint idea about, hey, I'm someone I'm someone on the spectrum, and I have a lot of it. I've learned a lot throughout my life, and I have a lot of advice I could bestow to people on the spectrum, my age, younger or older. And I also had a lot of advice for parents of autistic individuals because that's how my book is divided up. It's the two sections. So one section is for advice for autistic individuals over a variety of subjects for autistic individuals of all ages, and the second half is for parents because I noticed there's a lot of like scientific books on parenting and what on how to raise an autistic child and whatnot. But those were always from the perspective of the parents. Like they were parents telling other parents, hey, my kid's autistic. You should teach your kid or you should raise your kid this way. And I felt like there's some nuances being missed there because it's not coming from the autistic person. Like I felt like an autistic parent may say, "Oh, hey, I did this when I raised my kid," but their autistic kid may come back and respond with, "Hey, I hated when you did that. I absolutely hated that." And so, or hey, I really enjoy. I thought this was great and whatnot. So I felt. So I asked Jeff about, hey, I have, what do you think about this autistic book idea? And Jeff was like, "Hey, that's the best idea you have. Like, I suggest you go with that one." And so, like, here's what I did, and here's what you should do. And so I went and I went and wrote the book, and through a lot of trials and tribulations, but the book did end up getting published earlier this year, and I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud of it.
You absolutely should be. It's a huge accomplishment.
Thank you, thank you. And then alongside the book, I published an audiobook version of Growing Up with Asperger's Lessons Learned and Shareable Wisdom. And then I also launched a podcast with a friend of mine who's a behavioral therapist who works with autistic adults. And so, because I felt like that was a great opportunity to get both perspectives of you get the scientific perspective and the perspective of an autistic individual. And so, the Spurking Out podcast, which is on YouTube, and I'm really happy with that, and just getting to my goal with I've told my parents this, I've told my friends this, I've told everyone who I've mentioned the book to. It's that my goal with the book is just to help people. If the book has helped if the book only ends up helping one person, whether it be a parent of an autistic individual or an autistic individual themselves, if it just helps one person, then that's mission accomplished in my eyes.
It's been my experience that most autistic individuals or ADHD even that finally choose to speak out and start sharing their stories, it's coming from a place of I just want to help one person. I want one person to not have to go through what I went through. And we seem to be a very much so a helper community.
Yes, there's autistic people want to support other autistic people and whatnot, and so if I can help just one person, that's great. And then there's also a community element to helping other autistic individuals. I've noticed there's a lot of camaraderie, and there's a lot of what's the word? I'm blanking on the word, but it's kind of it's, the sentiment of, hey, I went through something similar, so, we're bonding through our shared experiences and whatnot. And that often translates into learning about certain different situations that I wouldn't have normally, or how to handle those situations than I would have normally. And so it's great to, see the feedback I've been getting from the book.
I'm pleased for you that you've had so much success with it and it's been such a wonderful growing experience. You said that you take it from two different perspectives, really. What is one piece of advice that you give parents in the book?
One piece of advice is, so trust. I tell parents that trust is very difficult to earn and very easy to break, because, like, from my experience, I have a very good memory. I can't speak for other autistic individuals, but I have a fantastic memory, and it's long term. So, if what I tell parents is that a good way to earn trust is consistency.
Mhm.
Like, if a parent says, "Hey, this is a rule that I have, I need you to obey it," and then you need to consistently enforce it, and that way the autistic individual might think, "Okay, well, I can this rule is clearly flexible, or it's clearly bendable." Or the opposite is true, where a parent may say to the autistic individual, "Hey, you broke this rule." The autistic person will think, "Well, no, I didn't. Based on what you've based on what you've described to me, I didn't break this rule." And so, in the autistic person's mind, that may think, "Well, okay, this parent has a very loose definition of what this rule they want to be. I'm not sure if I can trust them." Or I could be doing something normally, but they may perceive it as not so. So, be consistent being consistent is a great way to earn trust.
Also heard as you were saying that essentially you also have to be very, very clear about communication. My old one of my older children, he's autistic, and I know the biggest problem that we have had with rules, you just touched on it. And he didn't think that I was consistent in the way that I was applying the rules with him. And it would make him so angry and communication would just break down completely. But you have to just continue to reinforce that no, this is what I intended. If you misunderstood that, I apologize for that, but this is where we need to be moving forward. Did that work for you? Or was that a very unclear question and my ADHD just bit me?
Um, I mean, yeah, consistency is key, because the clear communication, and I mean, it's not, how do I put this? I mean, it depends on the rule, but if there are instances where, you can be a bit flexible on it, then yeah, you should tell your autistic child that it's like, "Hey, in some instances, this rule doesn't apply to this situation, and sometimes, normally it doesn't, but in this instance it does." And so, I would say, like, in those situations where it has to be a bit flexible, I would make it a point to tell the autistic child ahead of time, where it's like, "Hey, I know I previously said this, but this is a situation, a very rare situation where it is going to apply," or, "Hey, this rule does not apply, and, you don't have to worry about it." And so, because I mean, that's real life. I mean, in your professional world, things aren't going to be, black and white oftentimes. Sometimes they are, but oftentimes, you have to be a bit flexible. There's a lot of gray areas in there. And so, introducing to your autistic child that, hey, there is a little, I'm black and white on the enforcement, but there are some gray instances where, maybe I won't, or maybe I will, because of the situation or circumstance. Illustrating that um, can really help the autistic child, kind of process and internalize, "Oh, okay, I need to be a bit flexible in certain situations."
So, am I hearing you correctly that it sounds like you're saying with an autistic child, a lot of it's in the preparation, preparing them for what could happen?
Yes, because in my personal experience, 'cause minor changes, especially growing up, they tend to, I'm not gonna say I have a knee-jerk reaction to them, but it's like, "Okay, I didn't see this coming." I can't my what I thought was the plan, or what I thought was, this was gonna be my day, or however, that's now being shifted, and it doesn't and it kind of riles me up. And so,
Causes friction.
yes, it causes friction. Like, for example, like if my mom and I were going clothes shopping, my mom, like my mom would tell me, okay, we're going here and here. And then afterwards, after the second place, I'm like, all right, cool, we're going home. But then my mom said, actually, no, we're going to do this thing since we're already out. Maybe we need to get groceries. Maybe we need something else. But my mind is like, well, this wasn't part of the plan. What's going on here? Why are we doing this? This is ridiculous. Um, However, if my mom had told me beforehand, it's like, hey, okay, Mitch, we're going out to get clothes, but there's a chance we may need to go get something else if this store doesn't have it, or hey, it's really close to a grocery store, or something else. We may swing by there because it's in the area or it's on the way back. Just giving me a heads up would have gone a long way, and that way I wouldn't be caught off guard by the whole, okay, we're done shopping for clothes. Now we're going to go do this thing that I didn't tell you about.
Okay, yeah, no, I've found that to be the case with my son. Is if as long as I prepare him for what the might be's are, he's okay if they happen. But if he has no heads up, I've got a surly teenager on my hands for the next 2 hours minimum.
Yeah, that teenage angst tends to kick in, doesn't it?
Just a little bit. So tell us, we are running short on time. Where can we find your book? Is it just on Amazon?
It is, so the book itself is on Amazon. There are Kindle versions as well as physical copies. And then there's an audiobook version on Audible and I believe Apple Books as well. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, it's the audiobook version, which is narrated by myself. That is on Amazon as well. And then you can also check out the Spurging Out podcast on YouTube. The visual of the podcast is a donkey, a military jet, the outline of the country of Peru, an opossum, and a donkey, as well as a cheetah with wearing sunglasses. So look for those when you're typing it up on YouTube.
That is a very interesting logo graphic.
Yeah, it's they're represent those images are representations of some of the people we plan on having on, as well as myself and my co-host.
Okay. As long as you know what they mean, that's all that counts.
Yes.
Well, it has been a absolute pleasure talking to you today. Do you have any last thoughts for our audience?
Yes. I would like to read the ending paragraph of Growing Up with Asperger's, if that's okay.
Please.
Alrighty, thank you very much. So this is on page 248, the very last page, the very last paragraph of the book. And it goes like this. You are not alone. The world is a big place, and it has people just like you with similar issues and struggles. That should be comforting and not discouraging, because if they have those same difficulties, then that means they've overcome those obstacles, which means you can too. That's the great thing about not being alone in this diagnosis. You are not alone, and that's not a bad thing.
Powerful words, sir. Powerful words.
Thank you very much, Deanna. I appreciate it.
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure, and I hope that as you continue to grow and things continue to move for you, that we can have you on again in the future. This has been an absolute pleasure. Um, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Mitch Grace. All of his social medias and contact information will be available in the podcast blog page, along with a link to his wonderful book, Growing Up with Asperger's. Everybody have a beautiful and glorious day.
They say he came to save